because it's so much easier to keep going once you've started rather than keep going when you haven't moved anywhere.
I feel like this episode is for the dreamers.
What if I put all that time and work and effort into like building something for myself?
It's not just like, oh, I'm going to get 5 views. It's like, oh, what are my friends going to say?
I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Maybe I don't want to be a YouTuber.
That's the biggest roadblock, is when people say, oh, I don't know, or I'm not perfect at this, I'm not going to get started.
Learning is a form of procrastination. There's a point where you have to stop trying to learn and just do it.
Like if I go back and compare like my first video to my 5th video to my 10th video, like I can definitely see a progression.
Welcome back to That 30 Show.
Welcome back, everyone. G, I have a question for you. When's the last time you really took a risk and chased a dream?
I think the last time I chased a dream was when we started this podcast.
Aw, that's nice.
Back in January of 2023.
Wow. I think it's such a universal idea and concept of what is that thing that you really want to do, that you really wish you could be doing instead. But either you don't have the time, you don't have the courage, you don't have the money, or you just have, insert other excuse.
Mm-hmm.
For you and I, we talked about, as we've mentioned in the past, starting this podcast for years before we started it. And it was just always on the back of our minds. But for whatever reason, we just never gave it enough thought to realize, okay, let's just do it. Like, it's doing that thing that you always want to do, but you just don't.
You have a bunch of excuses.
Yeah, there's some sort of risk involved
Mm-hmm.
in it, or some sort of cost to doing it. And especially in your 30s, you get to that point in your life where you're like, damn, when I was in my 20s, I already had this dream. I already wanted to do this thing. For me, it was like, for example, it was like going to Machu Picchu. By the time I eventually went and I told my friends about it, they're like, oh, you're only going now? I thought you've been talking about that forever. Did you not go in this entire time?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you get to the point in your 30s where you're like, darn, I still have not started or tried to do that thing.
And you're like, if I started 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have made so much progress by now. Yeah. So this week we have on Graeme Lee, who is a YouTuber. Ooh. He started his YouTube channel about 6 months ago, so fairly new, but he really came on to talk to us about, having a dream and maybe giving it a go once upon a time and it maybe not working out the first time, giving up a little bit on that dream and then trying to tackle it again and trying to start it again. And that's essentially what he did. And he comes on to talk about his journey with that. I think a lot of the times starting itself is like such a burden. And I think he really talks about and gives us advice on like starting and how to start and that being like one of the most important things. That was something that I really took away from that conversation.
I found it particularly interesting to talk to someone who's at the beginning of their journey. Because I think it's easy to talk to someone who has 1 million subscribers and then they'll be like, oh yeah, this is what I did. It's like, well, it's, sure, it worked out. For Graeme, he's just started his journey, right? So similar to us, we're still growing our audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to get the perspectives of someone in that stage is even more interesting and insightful for someone else who hasn't started their dream or is just starting the dream as well. Because it's more relatable. It's more like, okay, we're all in it together. It doesn't have to be, basically, the idea that you're still persevering and working towards something where the ultimate result or goal has not been achieved yet. And what does that stage look like? I think that's sort of what I particularly enjoyed. The perspectives that Graeme gave is that he is at the beginning of his journey like us. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about a lot of things: not giving up, restarting over. trying to get over what your friends and family might think about you chasing your dream and what that might look like. So a lot of things to unpack in this conversation. We really hope that you enjoy it. Welcome to the show, Graeme. Happy to have you join us today.
Oh yeah, thanks both of you so much for having me on. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on the podcast today. I feel like this episode is kind of like for the dreamers, like we're going to talk about, those who have a dream or a passion that they kind of want to pursue, but might be afraid of starting, afraid of what people around them might think, and, afraid they won't be good at it, or even afraid of failing, like whatever that means to you. And, often those are manifestations from our own mind. So really excited to kind of pick your brain because you, I guess recently started your own YouTube channel, and that's super exciting and probably really nerve-wracking. I know David and I, we probably share a lot of the same feelings and thoughts when we first started the podcast as well, which is probably kind of like around the same time. So curious to learn all about your journey today. I guess to start, maybe just tell us a little bit about why you wanted to start your channel, how you got to start your channel, what made you want to do it, something that you've thought about doing for a long time, or something that was a bit more spontaneous.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I did start a YouTube channel last fall, and I am by no means a big channel. I think I just got my 126 subscriber yesterday, and I just posted my 29th video days ago. So yeah, thanks so much. So I'm still small potatoes, but I appreciate you guys having me here. But just kind of a overview of my channel. I think most of my videos are kind of about personal development and self-improvement related items. I'd say the niche is kind of like social situations where I've noticed maybe things could have gone better, and I kind of just talk through those, or maybe like life realizations where I've noticed or like I've figured out something small but meaningful. So essentially each video talks about a concept to like consider or to keep in mind if you ever find yourself in that situation, and it kind of all adds up into being like the best human being you can be. So that's the channel. Yeah, so with regards to the origin story, yeah, there's definitely a few layers to this question. And I'd say it really all started back in high school, which you and I attended together. So that was like 15 plus years ago. But at that time, like I really wanted to be a YouTuber. I really liked making videos for fun. And this was when YouTube was really kind of young and still starting out. And a lot of people were telling me like, I reminded them of Kev Jumba, who was like, I don't know, I think one of the biggest stars at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you're young, the idea of being like a famous online celebrity seems so cool. And I actually did make and post a video at that point. So I think a couple years after that, I was in university, and I filmed kind of like what I thought would be a cool Kev Jumba like video. And I thought it was going to blow up and go viral, and that would be the start of my wonderful YouTube career. And it did not do that. It got maybe like 36 views over like a week. And I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Maybe I don't want to be a YouTuber. And then after a week I took it down, and I was like, I don't ever want to do this again. And then, yeah, like fast forwarding through adulthood, I'd never really been that interested in side hustling. I was always, pretty content with my 9-to-5 job, and then just having my weeknights to be able to, play my weeknight sports or hang out with my friends. Like I didn't really want to be grinding. And I'd say that kind of all changed last summer, where I had a really good year at work, where I feel like I worked really hard and I performed really well. And I'd been kind of like not explicitly told, but kind of hinted at really strongly that I'd probably be getting moved up to the next level. And so I kind of had that expectation in my mind, like, oh, great, I'm going to keep progressing in my career. And then unfortunately, things panned out in a way that it didn't and couldn't happen. And like nothing against my boss or my work. Like I love them both, and I'm still really happy there. But I had kind of a moment of realization where I was like, oh, like I put in all this work and time and effort, and like I did the best job I possibly could do. Like this is, you know, I did everything I could to make it to the next level, and I'm not going to be fully recognized or rewarded for it. And that kind of lit the spark into being like, what if I put all that time and work and effort into like building something for myself, and hopefully get to a point where like I'm in control of my own reward and recognition, rather than it being on, or rather than it like relying on the company that I'm working for or someone else to make that decision. And so that kind of started like the spark to maybe like, okay, I should do a side hustle. And I was researching a bunch of different ideas, and that all kind of reminded me of like the YouTube dreams from all those years ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, it kind of ended up being that. And it was actually interesting at first because a lot of the ideas I saw around starting a YouTube channel were like, they involved like starting a faceless YouTube channel. And at first I was kind of like, oh great, like I can get into YouTube, but I don't have to show my face. So I don't have to go through all that embarrassment again. I can just build this in the background without anyone knowing. And I did kind of start with that. So I do kind of have like a faceless YouTube channel as well. But at the same time, while I was doing that, I had all these other ideas that I wanted to do, kind of like maybe cooking related or personal development and self-improvement related. And I considered trying to do them in like a faceless YouTube channel format, like maybe using like storyboard software to tell those stories. But eventually I realized like the quickest and easiest, as well as like the most genuine way to tell these would just be to like talk to the camera and show my face. And so that's kind of how I ended up starting my current YouTube channel, like the one with my face, a few weeks after that. And yeah, so that was like last September, I think. And so now we're towards the end of May when we're filming this. So, and yeah, now I'm a YouTuber getting invited onto podcasts. So, you know, talk about a success story.
I mean, I'm firstly sorry that happened, and but it's very relatable, at least for me or friends that I know, friends and family. This idea that you're at the whims and behest of someone else's decisions, and you're not really fully in control. You could do the best you want, but not get rewarded for it. I mean, that's so common in corporate culture. You're just begging for raises and bonuses and promotions. And especially if you are someone who's hardworking, you're not going to be fully rewarded for that, I think, unless you are working for yourself. So that's I can see where that impetus would have come from.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like the different reasons for why you wanted to start a YouTube channel too. Like in high school, it was kind of about, oh, this is like the flashy new thing, and maybe I'll go viral and be famous and, you know, be like a popular YouTuber. But now it feels like a bit more practical. Like you're really thinking about doing this side hustle as something that will either maybe like supplement or even take over like your career one day, because you're putting in all this effort and you're like, why not do it for myself?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's kind of funny too. Like ideally, if I think at the beginning I was like, oh, if I didn't have to show my face, like I would prefer not to. And it kind of just seemed like the easiest way to do this would be to show my face. But sometimes people are like, oh, like you're like an influencer now. And to me, it's almost like they're kind of separate entities. Like my influencer profile, if I had one of those, like I wouldn't necessarily want it to be tied to my YouTuber profile. So it's kind of just interesting to kind of think about it that way.
But you mentioned, Graeme, when you first posted the video back in university and it got like 30 something views and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I never want to do this again. I think honestly, coming into this conversation, I want to ask the question that is most interesting to me, and I wanted to get your thoughts on, which is the idea of persisting despite whatever results you're looking for. So I guess the first part that I want to get your thoughts on is, when you start this, do you have an idea of what your goal is? Because when people talk a lot about sort of your passion and work and entrepreneurship, there's a lot of talk about you have to love the work for itself, and And for example, you can write a book, but the goal can't be to sell 1 million copies because you don't have control over that. You just have to love the work and you have to be lucky in a way. So do you have a goal of, okay, I'm going to do this for 6 months, and after 6 months, if I don't get to X amount of views, I'm going to stop? If you do, or if you don't, like, talk me through how you measure your success / your enjoyment or fulfillment of the endeavor so far.
Yeah, no, for sure. Before I started the channel, I'd been watching a bunch of like big YouTubers who had made videos about like, oh, like if I was starting a YouTube channel, this is what I would do, or things to know before you start a YouTube channel. And there was one YouTuber named Ali Abdal who I felt like had some really insightful comments. And I feel like I took a lot of his words to heart, but he had kind of mentioned that like your channel is probably not going to get big until like at least a year in, and at least until you've made like 50 videos. And so I think for me, I kind of went into it with, I'd say like a pretty healthy mindset of like, okay, like nothing I make is going to go viral instantly. Only like my friends are probably going to view it for the first little bit. Like I just need to focus on getting way down the road to maybe about 50 videos or so. So I'd say like that's kind of been my kind of like a soft goal. Like it's just sort of like I won't really know how things have gone until I've made it to that point. So I'd say kind of like, yeah, like I'm aiming kind of for 50 videos, and that kind of makes it sort of a long-term focus. And, you know, kind of just based on all the things I've seen, it's like, okay, yeah, like once you make it to that point, then maybe things will take off. And so for me, I'm like, oh, maybe like I'll try to get to that point. And if I'm lucky, then things will kind of maybe take off around that point. If I'm really lucky, they'll have taken off before then. And if I'm not lucky, that's kind of just the standard, and I kind of just need to keep going. It can be kind of like, oh, like, you know, you're making each video at a time, and, you know, nothing's really blowing up. Like, yeah, that can definitely be kind of hard if you didn't expect it. But I think, yeah, because I kind of went into it knowing that, like, yeah, no one's really going to be looking at these. I just need to focus on doing it for myself, and getting the enjoyment out of it there. That's going to be what allows me to keep going and not kind of give up on it when things don't go the way I want it to go in terms of, yeah, subscribers or views.
Yeah, and that's really hard. I feel like we have to set our expectations to a certain level, right? Even, you know, with anything that you create, because you have no idea, but it's tough to be consistent and persistent at something when you're not really seeing the results. Like you have to be able to really actually enjoy what you do, or otherwise like set this goal for yourself. That's something that you can control. And I feel like you've been really consistent with your YouTube videos. Like you post quite frequently. So I'm interested in a little bit about your creative process with your videos. Like, tell us how you kind of come up with ideas. You say that sometimes it's about like little moments in life that you notice and things that you experience in your day-to-day life. But how do you come up with ideas? What is your kind of creative process for YouTube videos?
For the first 5 months, at least, like I kind of had almost like an internal schedule that I wanted to stick to. I was like, I want to post a video a week. And I think that was kind of some of the other advice I'd heard. It was like, if you want to be serious about this, like you need to really be putting a lot of time and effort into your channel, and you want to be posting like once a week at minimum. And I think when I was first starting out, I was like, this is so much work to have to post a video a week. Because like, so the creative process basically was like, you know, I'll have an idea or a concept, and I'll take the time to write out like the video script for it, like kind of think out, how does this concept make sense? Like, how can I turn it into something that is useful or that might be helpful to people? And I'd say that writing part probably takes the most amount of time. It's not like a bunch of tasks that are in front of me that I can just easily check off. It's like, you really have to like think about it. And sometimes it takes like a long time to do that. But once I've written it out, then usually I'd aim to like film it on the weekend and then spend the next week editing it, and then eventually post it the next weekend. But I think I noticed, I was like, oh, this is pretty difficult, because I'd be doing the writing for one video and the editing for the previous video at the same time. Yeah. So being able to like post once a week, I was like, oh my God, I'm this is all I'm doing, basically every weekday night and on the weekends for the first little bit. And yeah, I'd say like now that I've kind of built up a little bit of an inventory, I'm not sticking as strictly to that schedule in terms of like the actual creative process for like coming up with ideas. I feel like I'm almost like an undercover psychologist all the time when I'm like analyzing different situations. Like I might see something that happens and I'll be like, oh, like that person didn't handle that very well. Is that like a common thing that people do? What might be the reasoning why behind they did that? So I feel like now I'll be like constantly just thinking about these things whenever I'm in a different situation.
Yeah, you're essentially rewiring your brain to notice all the social situations and how people handle them. I think one of your recent videos that I watched, or a few videos ago, you're talking about like holding the door open for people when they're like at a certain distance away, and like when to do that and when to not and when to say no. And I was like, that is actually very relatable because we often find ourselves in those kinds of awkward situations. And you were talking about the amount of work that it takes to to edit and film and everything. I think we can definitely relate to that as well. It's a lot more work than people might think, even just for something as short as like a 6-minute video. You're like, oh, it's only a few minutes, but the background work that goes behind it, it takes a lot.
Yeah. And I was going to say too, when I listen to your podcast as well, sometimes like you'll say something or a guest will say something and it's almost like I just like immediately and inherently understand what that means. For me, like it's almost like soothing for my soul to hear you or someone talk about them, because it's just sort of like, oh yeah, like that, I understand that. Or the concepts for the videos, like I'm just trying to capture that feeling too. It's just like, oh, like if this is something that I understand when seeing the situation, like I'm sure other people might feel that way too.
Yeah, and I think you do a really good job of them. Just looking at your videos, they're very creative in pinpointing those little moments that maybe we're not even conscious of, that is something that happens to a lot of us. But it's like, oh, now that you mention it, yeah, that is a situation I found myself in a lot of times, but I've never really approached it consciously. And I think the other thing that I wanted to quickly sort of relate to earlier was, so you mentioned the time thing. I agree with G. There's a reason why we're doing bi-weekly episodes now. Actually, now that we're doing bi-weekly, I don't even know how we managed to do it weekly for a year. We did weekly episodes for a year, and I'm like, like, how do we even do that? Because now, even though it's bi-weekly, I still find myself struggling to do it. But so like when it comes to, G started this conversation saying this is a conversation for the dreamers. And a lot of times what holds us back from our dreams is a list of excuses. And oftentimes top of this list is, I don't have enough time. I am scared of failing. So we've sort of addressed a few of those things, right? We've addressed how much time it takes. We've addressed the fear of failure, where I really love how you say it's just really a matter of expecting it, right? And that's sort of similar to us, where we started this podcast expecting it to not work out. So when it basically doesn't go viral, like, yeah, it's basically what we expected. And so the third reason I think people might not chase their dreams is, well, I don't really know enough about how to do that, or I don't have the tools, I don't have the knowledge. The learning curve is too steep. I would love to, for example, do this or that, but I just don't know how to. YouTube is relatively easy, but now that it's such a thing, the barrier to entry becomes higher and higher, because the production value, the baseline production value is so high, even for any random channel, any amateur. Talk us through your learning curve and how you overcame or continue to overcome or learn the tools that you need. Because I've been really impressed with your thumbnails, with your editing. You have stock footage. I'm like, where does he get that stock footage? Did he pay some company for that stock footage? How did you not let the learning curve stop you from starting a YouTube channel?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Kind of going back to that video that Ali Abdal, I kind of watched, like, I feel like I got most of my like starting my YouTube channel advice from Ali, but he had a video that kind of talked about why most people don't start YouTube channels, and like the exact reason is because of fear and overthinking. There's so many things to think about, there's so many things to worry about, and it's easier to just say like, oh, like, maybe I don't want to do it, like that would be too much to worry about. And his advice for that was like, you just have to stop overthinking and you just have to start doing, like, just make 3 videos knowing that it's not going to be good, like they're probably going to be bad, and just kind of like use that momentum to get started, because it's so much easier to keep going once you've started rather than keep going when you haven't moved anywhere. And I think, yeah, I really took that advice to heart. I was like, okay, like my first few videos are probably going to be bad, but I just need to make them and kind of just go from there. And yeah, it's kind of interesting because, yeah, like I look back and I do think my first few videos are not great. At the time, I'm like, this is good because I don't have previous experience or anything to really reference it to. And now when I look back at them, I'm kind of like, oh, like I look uncomfortable in front of the camera, or I'm moving around too much, or I didn't cut enough space between the sentences, so I've kind of left some awkward pauses in between. And I think, yeah, kind of just like going through the process of like just doing it, and just I think I kind of had an idea of like trying to incorporate one new thing into each video. Like maybe it's like an editing technique, or like a different sound effect, or just something that was available in the tools that I use. Like I was like trying to improve each time. Yeah, there was a lot of suggestions about like what tools to use, and so people were like, oh, like use Canva to create your thumbnails. And that did make making thumbnails very easy. Like they have a bunch of templates that you can use, but I also almost didn't want to use those. So usually I'll kind of create, like I kind of use them as like inspiration, but I'll usually just create my own from scratch.
So it really sounds like you improved and learned iteratively. Like your first video, you're not going to wait until you have all the tools and all the expertise and technical know-how. You're going to make the first video, and then your 10th video will be better than your first video, because through those 10 videos, you're going to keep learning. And actually, a concept that I always like, because I need to remind myself of this, I'm really guilty of this, which is someone once said, I can't remember who, learning is a form of procrastination, because you could learn how to make YouTube videos for a year. There's just so much to learn about it, right? There's so many ways to make it better, perfect, editing tools, whatever. And so there's a point where you have to stop trying to learn and just do it. And that's what I'm really bad at.
Yeah, I think it's almost like learning a new language. Like I know for me, like I'm not very good with languages, but I know that if I'm trying to talk to someone in a language that I'm learning, like I want the communication to be perfect. Like I want to nail the grammar, or like how you're supposed to correctly say the sentence. And I'm like always really conscious about not getting something right. And honestly, language doesn't need to be perfect for the person to understand you. Like if you get like 80% of the sentence correct, like they're probably still going to get the gist of what you're trying to say. You just need to try, and like if you try and you just do, like for the most part, you're still going to be able to get where you need to go, and that's probably like the best way to learn it as well.
I was going to say that's often the biggest roadblock, is when people say, oh, I don't know, or I'm not perfect at this, so I'm not going to get started. But you learn best by doing. And I know from my experience with this podcast, I mean, I could have learned forever. And there's certain things that I've learned throughout this podcast process that I would have never learned. And I would have still had to go through and learn as we went through this process of recording this podcast. So I think the theme here is just get started, like even if you're not perfect at it, even if you don't know how to do something, you'll learn as you go. I think another reason why people are afraid to start something new is just the fear of like what people might say. And I think this is particularly when we're younger, we, care a lot more, like in our early 20s or in high school, we care a lot about what our peers might think. And, you mentioned when you first started your YouTube back in high school, it was like 36 views, and you were like, oh, like this is embarrassing, I'm going to take it down. And some of that, I don't know, maybe some of that or a lot of that might have been because you're like, what are my friends going to say if they see that I've only got like, a few views? But, as we move into our late 20s and early 30s, I don't know, maybe we don't think about that as much, or we don't care about that as much. Does that resonate with you? Is that something that you have found when you started your YouTube channel the second time around?
Yes and no. So I agree with your overall sentiment. I feel like now that I'm in my 30s, like I do care less about certain things. Like I think before I was afraid to confront someone who might be doing something like that I don't like. Like I think before I would have been like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. Whereas like now I think I care less about that. For starting the YouTube channel though, I would say that was probably like the biggest hurdle and the biggest challenge for me was sharing that publicly with everyone, because yeah, like it's one thing to kind of like not care about things when it's your thing. But I think because it was like my thing and it was like, hey, I'm putting myself out there, it's embarrassing because I'm in the early stages and I'm like essentially asking for your support. I still kind of did care about that a lot before I did it. And so I remember when I was like making the post to tell everyone like, hey, I've started a YouTube channel, like I was pacing back and forth. Like my girlfriend
It's
was
scary.
laughing. She was like, are you okay? Yeah. And then once I finally did share that, it was like a huge weight off my chest. And, you know, most of the, like, there was no negative reaction. Like, it was all very supportive. And it was just sort of like, oh, like, okay, like all of this was in my head. Like, yeah, all the things I was worried that people were going to judge me or be like, you know, they might laugh at me, but like none of that happened at all. Like, everyone was kind of just like, oh, cool. And then, you know, you kind of just go, everyone just went about their day, because I think at the end of the day, the only person who really cares about it to that degree is you. So yeah, so I'd say like yes and no. Like I do agree that like certain things now that I'm in my 30s, I care about less, and that one still kind of affected me because I was putting myself out there, and that was scary. But obviously now that I've gotten past that point, now it's just like, hey, I posted a new video. Like I don't care about sharing it on my Instagram stories or Facebook stories to share with everyone. It's kind of just like it's kind of just like, yeah, business as usual now. It goes back to like the idea of like you just got to do it, because everything seems scary before you do it, and then once you start doing it, you just you know what to expect, and that just makes it a lot less scary.
I definitely agree with you that as we get older, that worry of judgment doesn't really go away completely. It goes away a little bit, but not completely. I know for our podcast, I waited till the 10 episodes were out, and then I put out Instagram post, and I like spent like an hour writing that Instagram post, like every word. I want to like frame it well. I don't want to come across as narcissistic. How do I come across? I don't want to come across as like arrogant. I want to be like blah, blah, blah. And then, so I don't think that part changes as significantly, but I think the part that does change a lot is not yourself, it's other people, in the sense that if I released this podcast when I was in high school, I think there's a very good chance that a lot of my peers would have made fun of me, would have teased it, would have judged it, and or not taken it seriously, in a sense like, what is David doing? Like, what does he think he is? Like, who would want it? Whatever, right? But I think what changes as we get older is we become more respectful, but just more mature, and everyone has dreams, right? I want to go back to that point. Like everyone has dreams, and as we get older in our 30s, anyways, when we see people chasing their dreams, we respect that now, because we realize what it takes. And a lot of us who don't have the courage to do it, when we see someone do it, I don't know, I think if you're a decent human being, you'll look at that and be like, damn, like good for him. Like I hope he succeeds. Like it goes from judgment to admiration. Like when you released that post, Graeme, and I saw that on Facebook, I was like, damn, like nothing but props, right? Because it takes so much balls to put yourself out there. And I think when you're adults, you realize that, yeah, like I think people just are respecting and admiring your courage to chase your dreams, because now when we're older, we realize how hard it is. And so I'm glad that you only got positive feedback. And I have to say, I've also only gotten positive feedback too. Even though there's always a part of me that wonders, I wonder if there's like any high school friends that like saw my post and they're just secretly like, but then at the same time, it's like, okay, whatever. If there are people who judge you, like now, hopefully we have the self-confidence and self-esteem to know that those are people that, you know, aren't people that we need to care about, because they're not in the arena fighting that battle with you, as Brene Brown likes to say, and they're just, they're not important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think another interesting thing that I've kind of noticed is like support comes from like a lot of unexpected areas. Like sometimes I'll post something and someone who I haven't talked to in like 15 years will comment, and they'll just be like, oh, like I really enjoyed this video. And like I'm sure you guys get sort of like those random comments here and there too. It's just sort of like, oh, like I didn't expect that you were following along, but like, you know, it's really nice that you reached out to let me know that you appreciated it. And I feel like those sort of compliments mean so much more than those people will know. but I feel like kind of at the same time too, yeah, the support comes from areas where like maybe those people, like you said, David, they appreciate you're trying to achieve your dreams, and like maybe they're trying to do the same. Like I know for me, like I think a lot of people I noticed who were like really supportive were the ones who were maybe like doing their own little side hustle too. And so it's like you like appreciate the people who are doing the same things that you are. And like that support is almost a little bit louder than like, you know, maybe your close friends who you know will always support you, but they're not doing the same thing. Like they don't have that mindset of, you know, they're not chasing that side hustle dream necessarily as well. I guess while we're on this topic, like I don't think I ever told you both, but like I know I had gone to New Zealand last year in the spring. And yeah, we listened to a lot of your podcasts when we were driving around there. I think your episodes were like in the teens, or like, I don't know, episode like 13 to 17. Like it was probably around that time in like May 2023. But yeah, like we did listen to a lot of your episodes while we were driving around New Zealand, and we were supporting you, but we didn't tell you about it. But yeah, I just want to let you know now, because yeah, it was really nice to see you guys chasing your dreams, and it's really nice to see that it's still going, and it's really nice to now be part of it too. So thanks for
no, that's awesome. And thank you for listening. But now that you say that, it reminded me of a conversation. I mean, we probably even have it on like WhatsApp or somewhere, but I distinctly remember, because our podcast platform will show us where the listeners are coming from or listening from. And I distinctly remember that there was a portion of listeners, or like a significant percentage, that was coming from New Zealand. And I remember at the time I was like, David, do we know anyone from New Zealand? Like, why do we have listeners from New Zealand? And I remember I was like speculating who it might be, because we have another friend there too, but maybe that was you. And so now that's it makes sense now. It adds up. So thanks for listening all the way from New Zealand.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really like your point about the impact of support from folks that may not be as close. Because I think I agree. You don't want to take it for granted, but like your mom's always going to support you. Your best friend's always going to support you. And if my best friend listens to the podcast, or maybe your best friend watches your videos, like you appreciate that. Don't get me wrong, right? Like that's great. But there's a part of you that's like, okay, well, they probably do enjoy it, but there's a big part where they are going to listen. They're going to watch no matter what. Even if it's crappy, they're going to watch. So them watching is good, but it's when you have someone who doesn't need to watch. They don't need to watch. They don't need to support you. They're not close to you. They're not being a bad person if they don't watch your videos. But when they still do watch, then you're like, then you know a little, like it's different, because then it's like, okay, you actually enjoy my content, because there's no reason, you don't have to watch. You don't have to spend any time on this, but you are. And that means that I'm providing value to you, entertainment to you. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening to us. Honestly, every time I have someone tell me that they're listening, especially when I'm not close to them, I feel so awkward. It's like when people sing the birthday song and then everyone's clapping, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Like that's the feeling. That's the feeling I get when someone tells me, because I'm like, oh my God, what? Are you sure? You don't have to. Like it's not. It's not that good. It's not that interesting.
I feel like now that I've kind of experienced being on the receiving side of those compliments, like it's kind of made me a lot more aware of like the impact, and it's made me kind of more aware of like, oh, like if I appreciated someone who's chasing their dreams, like if I appreciated what they said, or like, you know, whatever they said made sense to me, you know, reaching out to let them know that it had an impact on me, like we'll have a much bigger impact on them. Because it means a lot to really know those things. And I'm sure for both of our dreams, like my YouTube channel and this podcast, like we're probably impacting more people than we think about. We just don't know, because, you know, people don't really take the time to reach out. And I mean, I totally get that too. Like I don't always reach out to people. Like it's kind of like, oh, like I'll listen to the thing. Oh, that was nice. Okay. I don't let them know. But now that I've kind of been through this process, now I'm like, I should let them know. And I probably will try to let them know more.
It's a really good point. Like some of my podcasts that I've listened to, I followed these podcasts for years. I spent hundreds of hours of my life listening to them. and they don't know who I am. They don't know that I do that, and they don't need to because they have so many listeners. But like the impact that they've had on my life is so great, and it's very disproportionate to the fact that they don't know I exist or that I have listened to them. It's very interesting to think about it that way.
You've touched on this a little bit about, with starting the YouTube channel and having some doubts about that and being a little bit nervous about what people might think. But I'm wondering if you have found any other like challenges since starting your channel, whether that's, just even the process of editing and recording your videos or like a bigger fear that you've had.
I mean, obviously there's the challenge of like trying to grow the channel. I mean, like, any small channel faces this. And I know like when I think I had like a wake up call when I like first shared it with everyone. Cause I know when I first started, or when I first was ready to post, I was like, oh, I have like 1,200 friends on Facebook and I have like 600 friends on Instagram. I'm going to get 500 subscribers, like no problem. And then when I did post it, it was like, I think I went up to like 60 and I was sort of like, oof, okay, like maybe not the number that I was expecting right at the beginning. And I mean, like, again, I knew that like, it takes a long time to grow a channel, but I think I was kind of like, oh, like, I kind of had that thought that like most people in my network would immediately support what I was doing. And then like it didn't happen, but at the same time, like I totally get it. Like I wouldn't necessarily just follow my random online friend's YouTube channel unless like I saw that it had like content that I found valuable. So I think like that was sort of like the first kind of wake up call. It was like, okay, like this process of growing the channel is going to be longer than I expected initially. And I think there's also sort of like the personal versus like the business aspect of it too. Like I know when I like all the YouTube channels are like, oh, like if you want to grow your channel, like you need to do the analysis. Like you should be using these tools to see what keywords people are searching for. If you really want to maximize your growth, like you're analyzing what videos people are searching for and seeing like, is there a gap? And if there's no video there, then you make that video to kind of fill that supply. And I feel like for me, like I haven't really leaned that much into sort of like the business side of it. Like I've, tried to take certain things into account, like making a catchy thumbnail or making like a catchy title. But I haven't really been treating this as like a business in terms of like only prioritizing growth and viewership. The challenge of growing a channel is like, it will be a challenge for everyone who's kind of starting out. And I guess sort of like finding that balance between, maximizing how to do it the best way versus doing what you want to do and kind of straddling that line. And for me, I feel like I'm still more on the side of like doing things the way I want to do it, but I probably should and probably will in the future kind of lean more towards the other side if I really want this to grow. So it's an opportunity and a challenge at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it kind of goes back to what we talked about of just starting, right? Sometimes you have to start knowing that you don't have all of the right pieces in place to necessarily monetize or be able to grow. And you might not have the strategy in place as soon as you start, but is that something that you are hoping to like achieve in the long term, like growth and reach and monetization and that kind of thing? I guess right now, this is still really very much your kind of passion project on the side, right?
It's I think, yeah, like it's kind of like what you said. Like I know the motivation to start this did kind of stem from like like I put in all this time at work, and so what if I had a YouTube channel that could pay me instead of work, sort of thing. But as I've been going through this process, like I said, I haven't necessarily been focused on it just as like growing a YouTube business. Like it's also become like a passion project of just creative things that I want to put out. So like I would say the long-term goal, like if I'm able to reach a monetization status where it's like I have my little corner of the internet that supports me and doesn't mind listening to the ideas that I have, like that I would say is the goal. But I think as I've gone through this process, it's almost like even if that doesn't necessarily happen, like it's still been a good process that I'm happy that I went through for myself. Um, so and yeah, like even if I like let's say I get to the 50 video goal that I kind of talked about earlier, and I'm not where I hoped I would be, like maybe I'm not at the 1,000 subscribers, which is the threshold that you need to be like a monetized YouTube channel. Like I don't think I'm just gonna like give up at that point. Like at that point I'll have been really far along in that journey. Like my videos are probably going to be much better then than they are right now, because I'll have continued to improve and learn different skills. And like it's kind of like I'm still on the same journey of just like moving forward. So my goal at that point might be different as well. And I think like I wouldn't have learned that if I just didn't get on that journey.
For sure.
For myself.
Well, we have released 50 episodes now for our podcast, and we don't have 1,000 subscribers. So is it time to pack up our bags, G, and call it a day?
No, we must keep going.
But yeah, that's such a great point about the challenge between basically it's a passion is very different to a business. For example, the podcast, if we just focus on our content, that's a passion. But then if we start trying to optimize for search engine optimization using keywords, it becomes a business. When you create a YouTube channel, you just create the content you want. That's a passion. But then you're like trying to game the algorithm. That's what is going to make it a business. Mm-hmm. And it's perfectly fine if you never try and make it a business. But if you do want monetization opportunities, for me personally, I feel it gets icky or annoying. I don't want to sell out. I don't want to make clickbaits. But that's the name of the game. I guess you have to. It's too naive to think, oh, I'm just going to make a great product and eventually people will find it. No, like I've heard, entrepreneurs say it doesn't matter how good your product is if no one knows about it. And so what does it mean to be good at marketing? What does it mean to get the word out, to be a good salesperson? Unfortunately, we have to do those things to get the good product that you have into people's hands. And so it sounds like, in the future, if you want to try and make the monetization more of a possibility, you probably have to focus more on that side that maybe you're not as passionate about, but that's just reality, I guess, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, like there's definitely a balance, and I think if I guess now that I'm still in like the early stages, like honestly, like if I focused on the business side and things weren't really going well, like I probably would have just given up at some point, because I've been like, oh, like this isn't working and I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. And so I think, yeah, when you're starting out, to me, it's almost like more important that you focus on the passion side of it, because like that's what's going to keep you going when things don't go well. And like things are not going to go well for most small channels too. So it's like you really need to have like that sort of like intrinsic motivation to keep going.
No, I agree 100%. Having said that, I look forward to looking back at this podcast when we're both like at 1 million subscribers and and looking at those good old days. But yeah, it's been so fascinating to hear your story, Graeme. And I think personally, anyway, I almost felt that it was more valuable and more interesting to talk to someone who is at the beginning of their journey, rather than an established YouTuber or an established business person or someone who's chased a passion and succeeded. I think we don't hear enough about the stories of not just that, not necessarily that hasn't succeeded or that or that's not successful, but it's that it's not there yet. We don't hear those stories enough. Right, we see the Ali Abduls, we see the whatevers, and they're at 1 million subscribers. But like, what did it look like before then? And I think that's the part that like doesn't. We kind of romanticize the success, especially when it comes to influencers and content creation. We romanticize the success and the virality of the successful people. But like, as many people might know, Mr. Beast, he spent 5 years making videos with next to no subscribers, maybe like 1,000 people, which is a lot. But like for 5 years before now, he's like one of the most powerful, probably the most powerful influencer on the planet. But anyway, G, any final thoughts?
Well, I would like to wrap it up by asking Graeme like a fun question about his favorite video to date that he's made. And if Graeme, you could collaborate with any YouTuber, is it Kev Jumba, or does Kev Jumba even make videos anymore? I don't even know, but
no, I think he's like a streamer now, but
okay.
Actually, I don't even know if his videos are still, no, they're probably still up. I just haven't looked in a while. Sorry, but video is probably one called How to Make a Lasting Impression. And I think I'm particularly proud of this one because I think this was like my 14th-ish video. But I feel like I'd kind of gotten into the groove of creating like the type of videos that I wanted to create. I'd kind of found the niche that I wanted to find. And so I feel like that was sort of the turning point where I was like, oh, like I really think I'm doing this the way I want to do it. And in that video too, like I feel like I was able to really just kind of, that was one of the concepts where I was like, oh, like this is something that I think makes a lot of sense, but most people wouldn't really think about. So yeah, I'd say that one's probably the one I'm most proud of, even though it's not the most recent one, and I feel like other ones have been better since then.
Well, it feels so great when it just clicks and you have that moment of realization that you're like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's great. But I mean, I guess to wrap things up, like, thank you so much, Graeme, for coming on to the podcast today. I know certainly like it was very relatable for us because I think we're kind of in the similar situation, similar boat in terms of where our, podcasts and YouTube are. Like, there are so many parallels that we could draw from, your experience and our experience. And like David said, it's great for people to hear about those who are just starting, and for those out there who might be, who might have doubts about starting something new or starting a passion project. Maybe this will be a little bit of encouragement that you can take a leap and always learn as you go.
Thank you so much as well from me. I think that whether it doesn't even matter if you're someone who has no interest to start a YouTube channel. I think anytime you start a passion project, start a new business, start a side hustle, very similar themes of fear of failure, fear of judgments, not seeing the success right away. So to all the entrepreneurial minded folks out there, hopefully this is an encouraging episode to stick at it, stick with it, and love the work as you do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Well,
definitely.
Until next time, thanks so much, Graeme.
Thanks so much, Graeme.
Hopefully, we'll bring you back on when you're at 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah, for sure. Keep the journey going.
Yeah, keep at it. Keep at it.
All right. Bye.
Great. Thanks so much, guys.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in this week and making it all the way to the end. We really hope that you enjoyed the episode, and maybe this is your sign to go after all that thing that you've always been dreaming about. If you enjoyed this episode, it would really help us out if you could give it a like and share the podcast. We love doing it, and we would really appreciate your support so that we can bring on more people to talk about life in their 30s. But again, really hope that you enjoyed the episode, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.